Okay, welcome everybody to another RSG educational Zoom. Tonight's Zoom is on the new World Screwworm, something that's just appeared on the front, and we thought we'd take the forward step and get a crew together, get some information together, and hopefully answer everyone's questions and let everyone know how we're tackling this issue. So I'd like to pass you on to our founder, Dr. Tad Thompson. I'm Dr. David Osborne, and people will introduce themselves as it's their turn to speak. So over to you, Tad.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks everybody for joining us here this evening. Just a few housekeeping things to point out. There is a chat function in the Zoom, and so as you have questions or as conversations go on, feel free to enter those questions or comments in the chat, and we will be able to answer those as best we can as we go. At the end of each section, I do have a question slide built in. And so what that allows us to do is just pause for a minute, review the chat, make sure there's anything that we need to bring out publicly in the forum that's not simply answered through the chat function. So feel free. We want it to be very interactive and hopefully informative as we go through. So really proud tonight to put this team of people together for everyone to kind of get to meet, to get to know. Uh, as we get rolling here, Dr. Scott Flanagan is our chief veterinary officer, and he is the lead veterinarian there at the Ballinger location in Texas. So he's kind of on the forefront of the New World Screwworm situation. So we're excited to have him present to us here tonight. Dr. Ben McLean, one of our associate veterinarians. Many of you have met Ben over the last several years. He'll share a little bit on production management and things of that nature. Probably a new face to everyone is Gabriella Murphy. She leads our R&D on the research and development from the perspective of reprophysiology. So she has a PhD from Oklahoma State there, and will bring us some great kind of cellular scientific methodology around the fetal development that we'll talk about a little bit later. Dr. Dave Osborne, which you met here just a second ago, has been a long-term consultant, mentor, and proponent for everything RSG. Dr. Leonardo Fernandez, hopefully we'll get on. He was on a plane and got delayed, so he'll talk a little bit about what screwworm looks like in Brazil. And then Stephanie Sexton. I don't know if Stephanie has made it on yet tonight. She is one of our good partners with Premier One to talk about inventory and supplies. So just a quick intro on everybody. Tonight, we're going to run through, I won't spend much time on the agenda. We're going to start off here with Dr. Scott and be able to gain a little bit of a historical perspective of where screwworm has been in the past, and recognizing that this isn't a new situation that we're going to deal with and manage. And then he'll share a little bit more about what the current status of the situation is in Texas and moving into the U.S. So at this point, we'll turn it over to you, Dr. Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Tad. I really am glad that we could have this session, and hope everybody can hear me okay out there. I thought that it'd probably be good to start with just a basic little blurb on the life cycle of the New World Screwworm, just so we kind of all have a framework or a basis of understanding in terms of what these little guys do and how they go about their business. Typically, a female will lay about 200 to 400 eggs at each laying. Usually it's at the edge of a wound or near an orifice of a mucous membrane, so around the anus, around the eyes, around the nose, that type of thing. And in her lifetime, she can lay, in some cases, greater than or around 3,000 eggs. So these girls are pretty prolific. They can do a lot of damage. You can imagine what 3,000 larvae can do. And so these eggs will hatch into larvae, usually within about 24 hours, and the maggots will begin to burrow into living tissue. And that's the difference between a normal maggot and that we're all used to, which feed on dead tissue. These maggots will actually seek out and feed on living tissue. and they will feed and grow very rapidly over about a 5 to 7 day period. They'll go through 3 larval stages, and then at the end of the 3rd larval stage, they'll drop off into the soil, wherever they're at, into the ground, and it'll turn into a pupa, and it'll pupate for about 7 days. It can be longer if the conditions aren't right, but roughly 7 to 10 days. And at that point, an adult fly will emerge and essentially start the whole life cycle over. One really interesting thing about these adult female flies is they only mate one time, which just happens to be the chink in the armor of this parasite and our ability to collapse their life cycle. So that's just a little bit about the fly itself and how the screwworms actually do their damage and things along those lines. Let's move on quickly to the history. I won't bore you with a lot of facts, but we'll go through it a little bit. In the 1930s, they recognized that this fly was different than the other flies, that are just blowflies that produce maggots. It was not the same as the old world screwworms in Africa and things along those lines. So they determined that. And it was at that time that they also realized that, through some of the work of nippling and busheling, that these females only breed one time. So when the male inseminates the female, they insert a plug so that no other males can come along. So it's the one and done. So once they figured that out through the 50s and 60s, they developed a plan to irradiate the males and sterilize them and release them into the environment to collapse the life cycle. And so in 1966, the USDA declared the United States free of self-sustaining screwworms, New World screwworms, which was a tremendous feat if you think about it. In the mid to late 70s, even a little bit in the early 80s, there was a few outbreaks, particularly in Texas. That's where my remembrance begins. As a young man, I remember riding out in pastures with my parents looking for screwworm cases. I would see boxes out in our pasture, which were the boxes that they put the sterile flies in when they flew over our place and dropped them. So most people have, or many people in Texas have, that same memory of dealing with these flies and seeing that. We had some pretty gross stuff that we would put on those wounds back then, not nearly as nice as some of the things that we use now. Anyway, there were a few outbreaks during that time that actually cost quite a bit of money for the state, $330 million. And then by the 2000s, we had continued to push the flies down through Mexico, through and into Panama to an area called the Darien Gap, which is the smallest area that, as far as landmass goes, that they have in Panama. And that was essentially the place where we stopped at that point, pushing everything into South America. And we have maintained that gap for about the last 30 or 40 years. And then in 2023, we had a break. Panama and Costa Rica began to see cases again. I spoke with someone, a colleague, a veterinarian, who went down to a conference. It was either late 23 or 24. And when we started having a few breaks and talking with the Panamanian officials at that time, they were overwhelmed with a large mass of people that were migrating toward the United States. And so what happened was they weren't able to surveil trucks coming up from South America very well that may have been containing the sterile fly. And so it bypassed our sterile fly barrier in the Darien Gap. So it blew right past that through trucks and animals that couldn't be as inspected as well. And it took these flies into central and even southern Mexico at that point. So flashing forward over the next 2 years, you can go to the next slide. We've seen a tremendous increase in the number of flies. Can you advance to the next slide, Dr. Tad? There we go. And so basically the fly has gone from the Darien Gap barrier all the way up through Central, and then up through Central America, and then Mexico up until our borders. And during this time, we've had 144,000 or greater animal cases and over 1,100 human cases. So this is a major issue, and it's something that obviously we want to take seriously, and we want to support all the efforts that we can in terms of trying to eradicate it and push the fly back. And then, of course, in June, if you go to the next slide, we find ourselves with the first United States case, 3-week-old calf in Zavala County, which is a little further south than the Ballinger location right now. I'll show you that map in a minute. But over that time, we've had multiple encounters with the fly in Texas. We had one case of a dog that had it in New Mexico. It was actually diagnosed in Andrews County in Texas, but the animal was actually residing in New Mexico. But all of the other cases have been here in Texas, and currently we have 13 counties under quarantine through the Texas Animal Health Commission. So we've had a full-on break of containment with the fly here in Texas, and so now we're dealing with some of the consequences of that. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and you'll see a map. Here's our map. This is our 6 quarantine zones that we have. Zavala County is right at the bottom, very close to Laredo, and you see essentially a northwesterly progression of this fly, and you see at the very top is the zone in San Angelo, where a calf not too far outside of San Angelo was diagnosed with the screwworm. Currently, just so you know, because many of you know that our Ballinger location is close to the San Angelo area, we're currently not in the infested zone or even the adjacent surveillance zone. We're just outside of that area right now, so we're not in any restricted area. And just so you know, the Texas Animal Health Commission, with work in conjunction with APHIS or the USDA, helps determine how these zones need to be mapped out. And the center part, the yellow part, is actually the part of the zone that's under quarantine, and then the little blue halo around the yellow part is the section that's under surveillance. So that gives you an idea of how we're attacking this in regards to locking down these zones. So I don't need to tell everybody here what an economic issue this could potentially be. They're estimating that this could cost, if we have a full-on, dissemination of these flies throughout the state, as much as $3.7 billion economic loss. So it's a big deal. And so again, and I'll reiterate it again, we need to take seriously the quarantines, take seriously how we transport our animals and how we move things to and fro, so that we can eliminate this pest sooner versus later. I will say, and I was very gratified in this, for the San Angelo, whenever they announced that there was a outbreak in Tom Green County, that was in the late afternoon, evening, at least when I got the messaging through social media. By 10 a.m. the next morning, we were dropping sterile flies in the area. So far, they were flying them up from Edinburgh. So far, the response has been very quick in terms of trying to get sterile flies into these quarantine zones. Okay, go to the next slide. And I'll finish up here talking just a little bit about livestock movement, because this is part of the meat and potatoes in terms of, what we need to know as livestock producers and what we need to try to help you with in terms of getting your animals to and fro. Number one, if you're not in a quarantine zone, then you basically have free movement of your animals. You can move them around the state. You can move them out of state. You just have to have your health certificates, your CBIs, like you always do. So, if you live in Amarillo, Texas, and you need to go somewhere, there's not any issue with you being able to move your livestock around. Same thing in the surveillance zone. You have free movement of animals. There's not an issue there. If you're in a quarantine zone, things are a little bit different. So let's talk first about if someone is wanting to come into a quarantine zone. There's not, in terms of moving in, if you're moving, like if you have animals you need to move in to your area and it's under quarantine, you can do so. There's not a problem with that. If they stay over 24 hours and then you have to or want to move them somewhere else, then you have to go through the process that I'll explain here in a minute in terms of having them inspected. So just know that you can move into the zone with essentially without any restriction. Moving out of the zone is a different story. You can still move animals out freely, but you have to go through the process. And so if you're in one of these quarantine zones and you want to move animals, the first thing you need to do is make a call to your regional office of Texas Animal Health Commission. The one that we have here in our area is in Stephenville. There's I think there's maybe 6 or 7 regions. Anyway, there's a map and phone numbers on the Texas Animal Health Commission website that tells you which counties are in which region. But you call them and you let them know that you have animals that you're wanting to move out of a quarantine zone. At that point, then they will set up an inspection of those animals to be moved. And inspectors can be accredited veterinarians. They can be health officials, even county agents if they've gone through the training to be an inspector. So that's the pool of people that they're looking for to be able to do these inspections. But then they will set up an inspection for your animals. And at that point, they'll come out, they'll look, and then there's several things that have to happen. If any of the animals have a wound, or if they have evidence of myiasis or screwworms on the animal, then they cannot leave the premise until that is completely healed over. It's been treated and it's completely healed over. So those animals cannot leave at that time. But for all the animals that passed inspection, they will be required to have a treatment for screwworms that's applied systemically, and that has to be recorded along with the fact that the animals are healthy and don't have any evidence of having a screwworm on a form. It's called the New World Screwworm Treatment Movement Certificate. And basically you go in, I've already looked at the paperwork for that. You go in and you put down all of the owner information. You put down the coordinates, the map coordinates, tag numbers, all of that. And then you also put the coordinates and if there's a change of owner or anything like that, where the animals are going to be going. And we send that off and you will get a copy. The person, if you sell the animal, will get a copy. And then the Texas Animal Health Commission will get a copy all online. So everyone knows where these animals are moving to and from. The inspection has to happen within 5 days before you move the animals. So this requires some planning. So that's just a few things on, movement of animals. And I'm sure there'll be some more questions as we go forward, which we'll be glad to take. But just know that it's a process and it requires pre-planning if you're in the quarantine zone.
Okay, Dr. Scott, you use the term myiasis, and if they have myiasis, what is? Can you explain to the audience what that means?
Myiasis is essentially that you have active larvae of the screwworm feeding on the animal, and that's just the medical description of what that is. So, and again, if you have that, you can't transport those animals. They have to be treated, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Have to be treated and free and healed before they can move out of that quarantine zone.
Okay. Ben, I know you've been checking the chat. Have we got what questions we have in the chat for Dr. Scott?
I don't see anything as of now, Dr. Tad. If somebody puts something in, I'll be sure to let you know.
All right. Sounds good. So keep moving along here. We're going to turn it over to Dr. Ben McLean to talk a little bit about general facility and production strategies.
Perfect. Thanks, Dr. Tad. Do you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide quick? We will get started. So one thing that we talk a lot about here at RSG is the concept of a 365-day approach to reproduction in general. And I think that we can take that and apply it here to the screwworm issue here that we have going. And so one thing that I think is important is that no amount of pharmaceuticals can replace general stockmanship and animal care. And that's really talked to us a lot about how if you can prevent a disease or an infestation like this or anything along those lines, it's a lot easier to prevent it than it is to treat it. And so the next couple slides we'll go through kind of has a basis in terms of how RSG recommends we can approach some of that preventative care. So like I said, prevention starts with production management. And one of the biggest things that we can do is bedding and manure management. And so we want to make sure that our livestock are always on clean, fresh bedding. One of the products that we have at RSG called RSG Guardian is a microbial product that works to break down organic material. It'd be a really great option here to put on the floor of your barns and then on top of your bedding as well, just to enhance the speed with which some of that organic material in terms of feces and urine and those types of things are broken down. And that will just really allow for a healthier environment for those animals to live in and be around all the time. The other important part is remembering that it's not only barns and pens that we need to keep track of, it's also trailers. And so whether it's on the way to RSG host sites or shows or anything else that the industry is involved with here, we want to make sure that we have clean trailers going to and from places. If you are coming to an RSG host site for any reproductive procedures, feel free to bring fresh bedding for after those procedures. We don't want to put fresh bedding on prior to as they are off feeding water for a certain amount of time prior to doing so. And then when they get home, we want to make sure that those animals are bedded with fresh straw, shavings, whatever is easiest that way, and whatever you do at home. But we want to make sure that that's fresh for them coming back and that they're coming back into a clean environment from that standpoint. Dr. Tad, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next piece that we want to talk about is fly control. And so this is really going to target the adult stage of the New World Screwworm. And so one of the products that we've had a lot of luck with in the industry and clients have reported that they've had a lot of luck with in terms of fly control is Agita. So you can use that product to spray pens and walls and really the environment that those sheep are going to go into. We're not going to use that product on animals themselves, but it's a great product in terms of just being able to make sure that the environment that they go into has some fly control. And then permethrin at 0.5%. So one of the products that you can use is Catrone 4. And with that, we're going to spray heads, bellies, and hind ends. And then as we go forward and if there become any issues in terms of availability with Catrone, there's also a permethrin 10 product that's a concentrated version that you can dilute down to the same concentration as Catrone if needed. And then as you go home from procedures or if you're just making sure that you don't have any issues with specific animals at home, you can always reapply that permethrin product as needed to just kind of reduce the amount of flies that are hanging around our livestock. So you want to go ahead and advance to the last one here. So the last thing is daily observation. So as Dr. Scott mentioned at the beginning, those eggs go from eggs to larvae in less than 24 hours in the right environments. And so we want to be sure we're checking those animals daily. And remember that screwworm, while it's certainly possible to get exposed via a wound, it doesn't necessarily need one. So Dr. Scott mentioned mucosas earlier, so mouth, nose, anus, eyes, etc. We want to make sure that we're checking those as well as just our livestock in general for any wounds or anything that way. And if you do see any, we recommend seeing your veterinarian to get those wounds closed up properly. That way we don't have any issues with screwworm from that perspective. So the next slide will just kind of go through a general overview in terms of what we just talked about in terms of bedding and manure management, fly control, and daily observation. And I just want to kind of reiterate that that we really want to try to prevent this from being an issue in the first place. It's a lot easier to prevent than it is to treat. And so production management can go a long way in terms of what that looks like. That's what I got there, Dr. Tad. If you have anything to add.
And so just has anything popped up in the chat for Dr. Ben on production management?
Yeah, so Dr. Scott responded to one of them. Charlie Hill asked, so on the permethrin, is there a certain period of time frame before or after AI date you'd recommend not applying?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question, Charlie, and I think we're going to get into that here in a few more seconds on the next portion where Dr. Murphy's going to share about that here in a second. I think we just got hacked.
That was
Yeah.
me, Tad.
Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Tad, I think it would be a good idea to mention the one question about checkpoints that we answered in the chat. For some of you may not be monitoring the chat. The question was, are there checkpoints in the quarantine areas? And the answer to that question is yes. They are checking animals going into and out of quarantine, both from the standpoint of making sure that you have proper paperwork and the animals have been treated, but also educational. They give educational handouts on what needs to be done and to protect your animals and things along those lines. And one other thing too, because I know that there's quite a few people from out of state here. For those animals that will be going out of state, they can come out of a quarantine area, but they have to have the form I just told you about, and then they also still have to have the CVI or the health certificate from their veterinarian as well, stating the health needs. I will say that it would be a good idea for all producers involved, if you're doing out of state, either bringing animals in or out, to make sure that you check your state requirements before you move animals back and forth, just to make sure, because those are evolving through this situation.
Yep, that's good, Dr. Scott. I appreciate that. And there, looks at the chat, there was a question popped up on how do you want to use Agita? Dr. Ben, can you go into that a little bit and can it be applied to the bedding?
Yeah, for sure. So the Agita comes in a powder that you mix according to the directions on the package. And then, yes, it can certainly be applied to bedding. You can also spray it on walls or gates or anything around your pens and things, barns that way. We don't necessarily want to apply it directly to animals, but it works really well in terms of a product that can go onto a bedding surface or onto the floor or onto walls or gates or anything like that, and really helps with some fly repellent that way.
And would you say that in facilities and barns, what are the key things that flies are attracted to? So we think about moisture, feces, organic material. Any other comments around that as to the things that we should eliminate for attracting any kind of flies?
I think those are definitely the major ones, Dr. Tad. The other thing you can kind of do is to help with some of that is just making sure that your ventilation is on point. and that you've got adequate airflow through some of those facilities. That'll certainly help with the moisture and humidity and some of those types of things. Flies are also attracted to strong aromas and that ammonia smell that you can get in barns sometimes. And so having an adequate ventilation can also certainly be beneficial from that type of a standpoint as well.
Yep. And that's where that Guardian product works specifically well with breaking down that organic matter and trying to get rid of that ammonia smell and get rid of that environment as quickly as we possibly can as well. Another question that's a really good one just popped up, and to be honest with you, I have no idea what the answer is. It says, are New World screwworm flies attracted to fly traps, and if so, what kind? I don't know if anybody in our research has come across that one as far as fly traps go.
I have not personally.
Not personally. I do think that they're more attracted to the smell of open wounds than they are, say, manure and bedding and some of the things that houseflies and whatnot are attracted to. So if there's any blood or serum or any products, coming, those also need to be cleaned up and made sure that they're clean. And even if there's a wound that the animals have that doesn't have screwworms, we still need to treat it appropriately, whether it's putting some type of a coating or spray on it, putting things on it that will help keep it sealed so that it's not giving off the attractant to a wound as easily. And then, of course, obviously something that will help keep flies off of the area. So they are a little different in that it's not just, they're not so much attracted to manure as much as they are attracted to a wound, which makes sense because to complete their life cycle, they need a wound.
So Dr. Scott, there was a question there as well on the chat. The question, how frequently should we be checking and treating tails or castrated testicles?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of things because we don't always know how long the permethrin products or whatever we're using is going to last. Typically speaking, permethrin can last as long as 7 to 10 days. But if you're in a close environment and those animals are rubbing on each other, or if you get a rain or something along those lines, it can certainly shorten that period of time that the permethrin is going to be there to help. So that's where, surveillance of these animals, if you see evidence that flies are blowing in the area of those tails and testicles, you need to probably reapply your spray. I wish I could say an exact timing, like every 7 days, but I would say you need to be checking these guys daily. And if you see those flies blowing, you need to address it.
All right, very good. Thanks, everybody. That was some great information.
Hey, Dr. Tad, I just did a quick little research blurb and found this from USDA. So the USDA does make their own quote unquote homemade screwworm traps. So as you can see here on the screen, each trap is made from just a small irrigation pipe. I'm sure you could use PVC pipe or something similar. And then it's coated with tanglefoot, which is essentially a sticky substance that you can get online if you need to. The Swarm Lure 4 is a product that is fairly regulated, and so it's probably a product that only the USDA is going to have access to. It's not something that we're going to be able to get or our clients are necessarily going to be able to get, but I think you could potentially do a partial trap there similar to what the USDA does with something that looks like that.
Great. Sounds good. Okay. If nothing else, we'll move on. Dr. Murphy can present her on pharmaceutical effects of embryonic and fetal development.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try not to get too technical. I was told to be very brief. My goal with this is only to create awareness that embryonic development is a very sensitive time. So we're going to talk very quickly about why looking and paying attention at early embryonic development matters, how those chemicals that we are using can affect the development, And what does that all mean for you, for your production or for your operation? Number one, when we're talking about early pregnancy, we all are aware that we have most of our pregnancy losses on the first month of gestation. And the reason for that is very simple. We have a lot of different processes that are happening. So we have our fertilization, early development, then we're going to have that elongation of our embryo, implantation, and so on. And with all that, we have a very high metabolic rate, right? So, and when we think about metabolism, we're thinking about all those chemicals being incorporated. So the embryo is extremely sensitive. So those chemicals that we are exposing the recipient or the mother, they can be metabolized and either impair development, cause birth defects, or even pregnancy loss. Now, what all can we use that could affect either pregnancy rates or embryonic development? Medications and dewormers that we're using, and Dr. Ben mentioned a little bit ago our 360 production management, and I'm just going to leave here the QR code for that. So it's really important for us to be set for success and having all of our animals healthy before entering the repro programming. And what that means is just avoid using those extras, medications and dewormers on your animals that are going through the program. Now, when we look at environmental and management factors, and especially dealing with this screwworm epidemic we're having, we are going to be using a lot of insecticides and pesticides to manage those infestations. And it's really important to notice that a lot of those, the active component can cause birth defect. However, all of this to say that we're doing a very diligent job of researching each of the products that we're going to be recommending as a company to make sure that they are safe for the purpose that they are being suggested and recommended for use. So what are the practical takeaways? Number one, embryonic development is a very critical window. It is susceptible to those chemical interactions that can affect both the pregnancy rate and the development as a whole. We need to consider what are the active ingredients and how they can pose a risk for the development and for the pregnancy establishment. Specifically around the breeding time, the first week of development and later on, and always balance the benefit of the flight control against potential impact. And the reason I say that is we're focusing on, right now, we are not seeing any cases in the northern of the United States. So this is a lot more of a concern in Texas, New Mexico, and so on, how it has been talked about earlier in the meeting. And very importantly, all the FDA regulated drugs, they go through a very rigorous testing. So they have the specific dosage and recommendations to use and what is going to be safe or not for those animals. And they have teratogenesis assays, and what that big word means is they evaluate how much of that compound can actually affect the embryonic development. So us as a team, we're doing a very diligent job of making sure that the drugs that we are recommending, they have passed those inspections, and specifically they are not harmful for the development. And just to reiterate is, don't freak out. You know, like the drugs are not the problem. It's just how we use them. So always make sure you are in contact with your veterinarian and you have done the due diligence of knowing what you are administering in your operation. Dr. Tad, I'll pass it back to you, the sharing.
That's good. We had a question popped up on the chat that says, is Clarify Fly helpful towards controlling this? So do you want to speak to that a little bit, Gabby?
The Clarify, I don't remember doing specific research on. I've done on a couple other feed additives. Let me do one.
Dr.
Yeah.
Pat, I've got some information on that if you want.
Yep.
Yeah, due to the life cycle of the New World Screwworm, because they're not attracted or spend time the larval stage in the feces, the Clarify Fly product is not really helpful for the New World Screwworm. So it's a life cycle issue as much as any.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Gabby, do you want to keep sharing? That might make it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and keep sharing, because then I won't be bouncing through the screens. All right. So at this time, one of the common questions we've gotten recently from a lot of clients is how will this change the breeding services day? So AI, ET, IVF, how will that change what we do in our day-to-day procedures in Texas specifically? But how do we approach that differently? So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dave right now and let him kind of go through some of those changes.
Yes, well, as you'd all be aware, it's quite difficult to do embryo transfer or AI without creating a wound. So our focus has been on discussing what we can best do and what products we can do to nullify any additional attraction of screwworm flies. So the number one thing that we do, which we've always done, is a concentration on our ability to close wounds and carry out procedures to the best possible standards. So that will always have the major impact. But as we've discussed amongst ourselves, we'll have increased diligence to make sure we're not leaving any additional openings or blood or anything of that nature. Now, we're looking at using, and we've already tested the products for more effective skin closure. So in Texas, we will be using surgical adhesives to completely close any wound on the day, including the small laparoscopic wounds that we cause. Although they're very small, as Dr. Scott has mentioned, that still provides additional attraction. So we'll be using the very best surgical adhesives to completely close those wounds. Then we'll be using a barrier spray, which will provide a coating over those wounds, and that'll have a double effect, that it will actually provide a physical barrier, and also the nature of the product also desiccates any blood, so it has a secondary effect on not attracting the flies. So that's the number two thing. And then at the same time, we'll be applying permethrin around the abdomen and also on the back end and on the pole to provide a further level of protection. On the days that you have a team on your property, though, we do want you to realise that the client and the workers and RSG and everyone on the day is actually a team working together. So we ask you to have increased diligence when the animals leave the surgery and they're outside. Any staff member needs to be on the lookout for a wound that may still be leaking blood. We are doing surgery, so that's unavoidable. We'll be doing our best to stop any bleeding before the animal leaves. But on the occasion someone sees something, they need to inform us straight away, so we can address that. So I think with everything, and I believe with everything that we'll be doing on the days, that we actually won't be adding any additional attraction. In fact, with the application of permethrin and that on the day, we'll actually be handling it to the best of our abilities. Anything further to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, Gabby, go back to that first slide if you will. So probably the one change that'll be go back one more if you will in the kind of in the programming phase of it. And so we've just actually got a question that popped up here. The question is for the average producer with ewes out on pasture, is there anything we can do besides surveillance and checking them daily? And so this is one of those things. If you go through the what the USDA is recommending, and to caveat off of Dr. Murphy's presentation on embryo and fetal development, it's believed that the Dectomax product does give us some coverage for 21 days post treatment. And so if you're on pasture or in a pasture-based production system, or whether you're doing reproductive work with RSG, this is a technique that we think can be beneficial to it. And so the way we're going to apply it to our programs is at the time of CEDAR insert, you'll give a treatment or an injection of the Dectomax product at that time, and that'll be for anything in program. So and this would actually go for your live cover people as well. Go ahead and give them a shot of Dectomax when you put the CEDAR in, because that's going to get you 21 days of coverage. So you think about when the CEDAR is in place and the tail of the CEDAR and all that could be potentially creating a little irritation to the vaginal mucosa. That would be a spot that a fly could be attracted to. So this is another way to help prevent any issues that way. And then while we have them in the chute, putting the CEDAR in place, we'll go ahead and have that 0.5% permethrin spray with us, as Dr. Dave mentioned there earlier. When we put the CEDAR in, we can go ahead and spray that on the rump area as well as on the pole to start creating some of that ability to deter those flies from hitting the healthy mucosa of the nostrils and the eyes and the vaginal opening. So that'll be one change on the pre-programming component of it.
I also put the 35-day withdrawal period in the chat for Dectomax, just so you know.
Yep. Yeah, so the Dectomax product, another question just popped up on the chat. It is approved for cattle, and the USDA has created an emergency provision for use in sheep. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why they didn't include goats on that document. However, I can't see why there would be any reason not to use it on goats. But so there is a provisional emergency usage on that. Dr. Scott, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, and we're recommending it for our goat clients, but it does by law the goats anyway have to have a recommendation from a veterinarian, and you can still give it to your goats. The question was, what is the dose? It's 1.1 mils per 100 pounds is the dose that's recommended.
And I'll go back to you, Dr. Murphy. Was there any kind of things in the literature that would worry us about using Dectomax to affect those early pregnancies?
Absolutely not. And there are some manuals published that even dating back in 2019 that they recommend Dectomax specifically as a method to prevent screwworm. However, it's not a method to treat screwworm. That would be something completely different. And from what we have found in the literature and the experience from our veterinarians from Brazil, Dectomax is very safe to use during early pregnancy and later on without any adverse effect into either pregnancy rates or birth defects on the animal and so forth.
That's perfect. So one thing that within our embryo transfer donors, so as I mentioned earlier, we're going to give it at CEDAR insert to everything, no matter what the procedure is that you're going forward with. The one difference is going to be on the donor ewes and donor goats that we put through a conventional mowat surgery. So we're actually making the incision, as you can see on the left-hand picture there, and pulling the uterus out. On those animals, we're actually going to give another injection of Dectomax, or recommend giving another injection of Dectomax on the day of surgery. And so at this point, the embryos are removed. There's no worry about fetal development. There's no worry about anything there. And we're going to wait. We need about another 14 days for that body wall to finish healing post-surgery. So the recommendation is to apply another, or provide another injection of Dectomax on the flush day, right along with our Estromate, right along with our Nuflor, or the antibiotic of choice, post-surgery. And then that'll carry them another 21 days to get them through that surgical healing. So this layered over the top of the things that Dr. Dave already spoke about, of, proper hemostasis, proper skin closure, surgical wound glue, as well as the waterproof barrier with the permethrin on top. We feel like there's a multitude of layers of preventions of that being the source of a screwworm infestation. So. Okay, and then this slide here, just as far as post procedures, kind of goes back to that, really being very diligent in our day-to-day operations. And so making sure that we're looking at these animals closely. We'd recommend certainly looking at them daily to make sure that we don't have anything going on. They're not stomping at anything. We don't see a massive amount of flies bothering them, and just really pay very, very close attention to those animals.
Do we have any questions in the chat? I'm not able to pull them up here. Ben, if you wanna.
Yeah, Dr. Tab, we got a good question. It says that Texas Cattle Raisers Association is recommending to spray cattle for flies 24 to 48 hours before they leave the premise on a trailer, and then to use a premise spray in the trailer when cattle leave for transport. They're doing this to try and keep from transporting new World Screwworm flies on trucks. This is a practice we need to look at.
Yeah, I think that would be, and I'll put it out to the panel too, but I think that'd be a really good way to apply that 5%, 0.5% permethrin spray. We know that it's safe for the procedures and applications that we're going to do. We can also spray the inside of the trailer, coat it really well, as well as the stock before they get on there. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback off of that, I think spraying your trailer, that'd be another great use for that Agita product as well. Not that you couldn't use the permethrin if you wanted to, but I think that Agita product could also be of value there as well.
Yep, good question, Steve. All right. At this point, we'll turn Stephanie. I think she's on there. We can want to get your input, Stephanie, from the supply side of the products that we've been talking about. Obviously, Premier One is key to distribution of a lot of supplies and a lot of products. Want to just get your input and your feeling on what you're seeing in the market. How should we be approaching supply inventory management and things of that nature?
Sure. Hi, all. Sorry I was late. The cows couldn't tell time out in the field, so had a little emergency there that we had to tend to, but that's how it goes. So regarding availability, it will be a fluid, constantly changing narrative. We have been trying for the last couple weeks to get more Dectomax on hand. We are getting limited right now. So hopefully the manufacturers will gear up and get the supply chain reloaded, but that may become a problem because if we're talking about Dectomax, you know that everybody else is doing the same thing. So we have played as many cards as we can currently to get as much supply in as possible. So right now we have some on hand but the small bottles are back ordered. And I probably we're going to have a instance where producers are going to start to hoard it, kind of like tetanus antitoxin when we couldn't get it. So question that I had is the generic Dectomax, that's probably in play as well for the docks here. We're trying to source that as well. That's a question, I guess, is the generic Dectomax, there's no problem with that, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right, good. The Catron and the screwworm sprays, that's the most critical thing right now that they aren't stocked on. So the permethrin spray, the antibacterial sprays, such as like the Umber is, I think maybe, did you guys talk about that early? Those would all be kind of products that maybe you could use in place of the Catron or the screwworm spray. I think that's the gist of it, but I think it's going to get critical at some point, but hopefully the manufacturers are gearing up.
So it's a little bit like toilet paper and COVID.
There you go. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, the hoarders will win out. So we'll keep everything going just as quick as we can. So that's all I have, Dr. Ted.
Yeah. So I don't know. Another comment there in the chat came up on the Exult product. Gabby, I don't know if that was one that came through. I think that was one that came through as a teratogenic product in your research, if I remember correctly. Does that ring a bell?
Not organic product, but it's from the main component of the Exode is a new pesticide called fertilizer.
Yep.
Fertilizer. And there's very limited research published on how does that affect the embryonic development, and if it would cause any birth defect or not. But all that to say, if it's approved, we believe that it is safe on the dosage recommended, but us as a team is not one of the core recommendations from our side, because we haven't found enough evidence that is safe to be used. So I'm not saying that it's a terrible product by any means. I'm not saying anything of those sorts. It's just we don't feel confident on the data that is published right now that is safe for us to recommend.
Yeah,
It's
Right.
Dr. Ted, Dr. Murphy, what about a product called F10?
There are some other exalt they use for pregnant.
Dr. Castro is just making a comment that back in Brazil they use Exalt on pregnant cattle.
Yeah.
So
There's a bunch of dairy cattle there. 5%, I think so.
did you guys hear that, Dr. Tad?
I did. The question is, probably the question there ends up being is, what stage of gestation is it being used? I think the cautionary tale in all this is, we don't really know enough about some of those products. And so when we're talking about doing, whether it's, artificial insemination, it doesn't matter what species, right? If it's artificial insemination in cows or goats or whatever it ends up being, we're talking about the earliest, most delicate stages of fetal development and that whole process, which Dr. Murphy could give you a great in-depth discussion on how those processes work. But it's no different than in humans. When you look at what the impacts of outside whether they're hormones or whether they're toxins or treatments for something can impact that fetal development, because it does get into the blood circulatory system and it is there. And so just the real cautionary tale is trying to do things as well educated as we possibly can, and making the best informed decisions we can, because we will not have a definitive yes or no answer. It's a very different scenario when you have a 60-day pregnancy in a sheep or a goat than it is in a 6-day pregnancy in a sheep and a goat. by 60 days along, that pregnancy is much more solidified. It's much more rooted. Fewer things are going to have a different impact on it. At that early gestational period, a lot of these products that we just don't know for sure may be completely safe, but they could also create complete absorptions, abortions, deformities, all kinds of things that way. So probably we just gotta be careful we don't hit the panic button too hard on it. To be diligent in what we do, make good informed decisions, and not panic. So.
Exactly, Dr. Tad, and just to pigtail a little bit on that, like you mentioned, that early gestation, that's when we have organs already beginning to develop around day 9, 11. That's when we have gastrulation starting. So it's a very sensitive timing for development of the neural cord and all the organs of that future calf. So that's why we have to be so careful of what we are exposing the recipients that are gestating those embryos.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have a few questions in the chat.
Yes. Dr. Scott, you just responded to one about the reemergence of NWS. You want to build on that just a little bit?
Yes, I've kind of alluded to it a little bit when I was talking about the history. The question was, do we believe that the reemerging of the new world screwworm is due to an infected animal getting through our barriers, not resistance to preventative treatments? And the answer is, it was solely due to the screwworm being able to bypass our barriers because we weren't maintaining the surveillance in Panama that we really needed to. It was not a product issue. Our products that we have do work. This was a surveillance issue, and it busted past our zone of flies that we had established there in Panama. Interestingly, because all of our money was in Panama, once it got past that barrier, there was really very little countermeasure that we had up through Mexico and even into Texas. Now we're directing flies back to this area, and over the past few years, we've been directing flies into Mexico, but it hasn't been enough to stem the northern movement.
And Dr. Scott, I'm just gonna add a little bit on what you made a comment about pesticide resistance that can be developed, and that's why we're talking a lot about being attentive to what is the recommended dosage and never try to stretch the drug that you have at home, because that could cause more problems in the future. So we can start developing those strains that can be resistant, and that will be a major issue. So always be really diligent with what you were administering and how much of that you were given.
Yeah, that's good. We have Dr. Leo Fernandez with us also, and he's a resident of Brazil and has lived and worked with screwworm issues in the country of Brazil for a long time. So we just want to get Dr. Leo's impression on what that is like and kind of what your thoughts are, Dr. Leo.
Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Tad, for putting all that together. Thanks, RSG. I'm just going to tell you guys about my experience at home as Brazil, doing the predominant tropical and subtropical climate. We have the presence of the flies all on a whole year. It's making the screwworm infestation a constantly sanitary problem, challenger for the livestock farming. We deal with these almost every day on the farms, especially on the extensive cattle, sheep, and goats farms, ranches. It's a very common problem on the umbilical of the newborns. We don't have much help from the government in Brazil, so we basically need to deal with this as a challenger and just keep going. For my perspective, we should not panic, don't push the bottom of the panic too hard. As you know, we can deal with this problem. Of course, we don't want to this grow and should not grow as you guys are clean of this. It's an easy fix when you get done early, as Dr. Scott said. We need to really take care right now and eliminate that, because if they grow, it's gonna be too hard to get it. On the farms, most of the workers know how to deal, so they keep looking for this signal, the visual signals on the animals, and as soon as they detect anything, they just go on and put their hands on and clean it up. Clean it up where they have these, take the larvae out, and clean the whole animal. And we also inject Dectomax or ivermectin or something to help, not just topic, but also get injections of one of these two. And that's how we handle with that over there. So it's a kind of a normal disease that we deal every day. I'll pass back to you, Ted.
Yeah. No, thank you, Dr. Lira. It's kind of refreshing to hear that, while this is a major problem, and it has legs on it, literally and physically and figuratively, that it is something we can manage, and others are managing it. So we just need to stay diligent in our communication and in our observation as to how we help work through this with each other. I think one thing I just wanted to jump back to on the permethrin, and so as some of these other products become harder to get a hold of, and Stephanie, this is probably a question back to you. Like the permethrin 10, or the high concentrated product, you still have that readily available in stock, which can be diluted in water and then applied through a hand spray bottle. Is that correct?
We sure do. Yeah, and so far the Agita has not been in short supply either.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So while people run to the toilet paper aisle, which is fine. We know that, and that we know those are good products, but we also need just to think about what are our alternatives. And I think one of those is the permethrin concentrate. You can buy a jug of that and dilute it at I think it's a 1-to-20 ratio into water, and be able to apply it to the animals to help prevent the screwworm. And then, as we talked about, the Agita for kind of the barn bomb, if you will. And like as you start working animals, I think also thinking about it just from a practicality standpoint. So if you're going to work a set of animals and you're going to put them through a chute system, and you're going to give injections, you're going to give vaccines, you're going to do all your traditional regular management practices, let's think ahead on some of that, and let's spray that area the night before, or let's treat the barn the night before, and start to make sure that we kind of have our environments that we're going to work in under control as well before we start doing some of those practices. And then Stephanie, as you mentioned, the Umbreeze product earlier, with the desiccation ability of it, that's another great product to put on around your ear tags, around your tails, around your testicles, anything like that you're banding and creating those kind of obstacles. That's a good product to create a barrier with there as well.
Yes,
So,
sir. And easy to use.
And easy to use. Yeah. And then, actually one of the other things that came up in today's discussion was, how often we've all done it where we've given an injection in the muscle somewhere on the body, and you get blood from that. Yeah, for whatever reason, you do it properly, but there's bleeding that comes out of the skin. And I think we need to make sure it goes back to that, the importance of good husbandry, the importance of good management, the importance of just being self-aware of the situation you're in. And so if you give that injection, no matter what it is, when you remove that needle, put some direct pressure on that injection site, hold it off for a second, You don't have to rub it. You don't have to rub it hard, but some direct pressure for a few seconds helps to occlude any vessels in there. If there is any bleeding, helps to eliminate it, and hopefully keeps the blood under the skin if it does bleed. And then if it does leak out, there's a very simple cleanup for that, and that's going to be peroxide. So don't everybody run to the store and clear the shelves of peroxide, but it is another one of those simple, easy products that we can apply to those locations, breaks down those red blood cells, kind of eliminates that attractive area to any kind of flies, truthfully. So just again, another one of those good husbandry practices. So I would kind of open it back up to the panel real quick. Is there anything else anybody has thought of or has come across as we've had this discussion that you want to bring to the table?
Dr. Tad, I got a question by text that I thought was a good one. They ask, what do you do if you suspect that you might have New World screwworms? What step do you take? What do you do? And I think that was a great question. We've talked so much about prevention. We really haven't talked so much about what do we do if they're present or we think they're present. Number one, you need to call your regional office of the Texas Animal Health Commission to make them aware that you might have a situation where you have screwworms. Don't move the animal. You keep the animal in your location. Don't take it somewhere. You take it to your veterinarian, obviously, but we don't want to spread this thing around. As far as sampling of the larvae and eggs, you want to glove up, because just in case you had a little wound on yourself, you don't want to contaminate yourself. And you can remove those and put them in a screw top vial of some kind, or pop off the rubber stopper of a red top tube, something along those lines, and put 70% alcohol, just normal rubbing alcohol, in with your samples. You want to try to get down there deep if you can to get some of the larvae that are further down into the tissue, because it's not uncommon to have a mixed set of larvae where you have some just blowfly larvae and some screwworm larvae all mixed in the same group. So you want a sampling. The other thing is they like you to get a sampling of sizes, because that gives them an idea of how long the wound has been there, so that they can kind of tell you, if this has been going on for 3, 5, 7 days or whatever. That also gives them good knowledge of how long the flies may have been present in the environment. Obviously, when you call the Texas Animal Health Commission, they can give you further instruction. You'll end up sending the samples to Ames, Iowa, to the center there. The THAC can give you, like I said, addresses and everything for that. But your first step, if you suspect something, is to call the Texas Animal Health Commission and get them involved.
So, Dr. Scott, how should we approach fresh wounds?
Like that don't have any larva or anything, just a fresh wound?
Yep, runs through the barn door and gets caught on a nail.
Yeah. Don't delay. Don't go, hey, man, this will probably get better on its own. Aggressive wound therapy, by if there's a wound closure that needs to be done, like if it's that bad, consult your veterinarian for that. Get that closed up. If it's more superficial than that, then using some of these products like we've talked about to seal the wound. Make sure that we don't get an infection, which perpetuates the length of healing time, which increases your window of susceptibility. So I think the overall thought is we want to be as aggressive as we can at treating those wounds that we may see, which would normally, like I said, in normal circumstances, it'd be like, it'll probably heal on its own. Well, maybe it will, but we don't want to give a window for the screwworm to be able to get in there and do its damage, because that'll make it a lot worse. So aggressive wound therapy is the way to go.
Perfect. On the chat, we did have one question came up on the permethrin product again. And I guess one thing I just want to point out, and I'm going to tell you this from my own mistake, is make sure you keep track of the concentrated, the 10% concentrate versus the 0.5% topical or the ones that we're going to put on the animal. If you end up using the high concentrated product directly on the skin, like with the Ultra Gross product or any of those specific pour-ons, you will burn the hide. And it's quite embarrassing when it's a kid's show lamb. So I personally have experienced that. So it won't, it's not going to kill the animal, but it definitely will leave a mark and is unnecessary. So just be aware that there is differences in concentration. So when you pick up that jug, read the bottle, make sure you label things correctly. So if you get the high concentrated product and you dilute it into a spray bottle, make sure you label, put some tape on that spray bottle, use some tag pin or something that's permanent, so you make sure you get those things properly labeled.
Dr. Tad, and on that, from all of the, permethrin is one of the drugs that we have found the most research published about. And on the recommended dosages and low dosages, it's completely safe. But whenever we start giving those really high concentrations, that can be prejudicial to the embryonic development. So, and can cause birth defects. So also be very aware of what you just said of concentration of what you were applying to your animal.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point, Gabby. Thank you for that. Team, anybody else have anything?
I don't think I have anything else. Unless
Okay.
there's any other questions, or if you want me to talk about embryo development, then we can spend another hour here.
You could do it in 10 minutes. We're coming up to our hour and a half. So we do have some resources for you guys. On the RSG website, there is a dedicated page specifically to the new World Screwworm situation, and so we'll continue to post things there as we hear about them, as we learn about them. There's obviously information on our Facebook page as well, and then there's I don't know, Jordan, if we can post that link that Steve just put up there. There's some free publications Steve just posted on the chat, that if you're not on the chat, take a look at it. He just sent some links there to some free publications on how to inspect and things of that nature. So there's a lot of information out there. My only caution is make sure that your information you get is accurate, and make sure your information is well researched. So Dr. Google is not always the best. And so, or somebody down the road that sends something on social media isn't always accurate either. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to our team. We're happy to help, happy to be a partner through this time. We just want to make sure that everybody's doing our part. So if you have any questions, keep us posted. Otherwise, we'll see you down the road.